I've had plenty of experiences, but this one is one that literally traumatized me.
It breaks my heart into two when people lose their minds.
And so, just a terrible, evil person.
Tonight, we're exploring human evil and things we cannot explain. It's terrifying how much darkness hides in plain sight. I found accounts that'll stick with you.
I received an email from someone named Angie who says that almost 50 years ago she was working at a small local shopping mall and a janitor told her something that stuck with her and that she still wonders about. So in the 1970s, Angie was working at a local mall and she said it was very slow. It was a smaller mall and the shifts often went by in a dragging pace. So the store employees would often go to the front of the store to chat with other mall employees or security guards or the janitor, anything to make the shift go by faster. I actually worked at a mall when I was 16, and I can attest to the fact that mall culture is a very real thing. We were friends with everyone from every store, and it was a very fun time in my teenage years, but I digress. Anyway, Angie says that there was one mall janitor that worked there who was typically a very quiet man. He kept to himself and never seemed to want to engage in conversation anytime the other mall employees were all gathered together and talking, but Angie guessed that he was in his mid to late 50s, and she said that while he was polite in that he would say hello in passing, nobody really knew anything about him other than the fact that sometimes when he went about his work, he seemed a little bit irritated. Some people assumed that he had some mental health challenges, but he was very conscientious and intentional with his work and he kept them all extremely clean, and so it wasn't really a problem. It would just be like he would be changing a trash can and then get all of a sudden very irritated at the trash bag and seem to have a small outburst. But on this one particular night, Angie said the shift was dragging. There was nobody in the mall and she was desperate to make the time go by faster. And so she looks out of the store to see if she has any friends outside, and there's nobody out there besides the mall janitor, and he's changing a trash bag in front of her store. So she was like, you know what? I'm just going to go and talk to him. And she walks out to the front of the store and she tries to strike up a conversation. And she said that he must have been feeling chatty because he actually engaged her. And she was like, how's your night? And he was like asking her all kinds of things about her. And he's like, where do you go to school? What are you studying? And she tells him, and he basically tells her that he thinks it's great that she's getting an education and how important that education is going to be for her future. He just seems wowed by her, and he's like, it's so great that you're getting an education because it means you're going to get a great job. And she's like, wow, this guy's really nice. Like, I feel bad that I've never really given him the time of day before. And then she starts asking him a little bit about him. And that's when he tells her, I wasn't always a janitor. I went to school at such and such a university, and then I worked for NASA, and it was actually a really great job at first. And when he told her this, Angie said that she immediately dismissed this as delusion. She thought that there is no way that this janitor went to this amazing university and then was a rocket scientist at NASA and is now a janitor. Like, there's no way. But she didn't really want to irritate him or tell him that she didn't believe him. So she just said, oh, wow, that's amazing. That must have been a great time in your life. And he says, yeah, it was an amazing time at first. But then I saw a bunch of things that I wasn't supposed to see. And they gave me a bunch of substances so that I would forget what I saw. And now my head's all messed up and this is the only job that I can do. But again, she dismisses this internally and she's like, this must just be part of his delusions or his mental health challenges. And so she just says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And Angie also pointed out that this was the same decade that Martha Mitchell, who was the wife of former Attorney General George Mitchell, claimed that the CIA had kidnapped her, given her substances, and done a number of other things to her because she had information about things that she wasn't supposed to know about. The media then tried to spin Martha Mitchell's story as though she was a delusional alcoholic and was making all these things up before it came out that she was actually telling the truth. And so given all of those events, Angie was actually a little bit intrigued by what this janitor was saying. Ultimately, though, she says she still did not believe him. And so she's about to head back into her store. She says goodnight to the janitor and she turns around and he says, I can tell you don't believe me, but I can prove it to you. And she goes, how could you prove it to me? And he pulls out his wallet and then a photo from his wallet and he shows her. And in the photo is what appears to be a younger version of him. And it's in an office type setting with the NASA logo on the walls. He was seated at a table in a white shirt, a black tie, a pocket protector, and horned rim glasses and a buzz cut, which would have been typical at the time that he claimed that he worked there, with a number of other men who were dressed in an identical fashion. She said it was clearly the same man, and given his proximity to the other men who were seated around the table, it was very clear that none of the men in those photos were janitors. She said at the time she had no reason to believe that the photo was fake because this was the 1970s and it was a time before Photoshop and before AI. But she said she also remembers having the thought of like, okay, if there was some agency that was going to go through the whole process of giving this man substances to prevent him from remembering his time at NASA, wouldn't you make sure that he had nothing in his possession that could prove that he had actually worked there? She said she saw him a few more times after that, but he never engaged in conversation with her again. He would just smile and say hello. But she said she's well aware that this could have just been a man with delusions. But she says if that's the case, she has no explanation for how he produced that photo. So she wants to know what you all think. Was the man telling the truth? Even 50 years later, she says she can still remember that photo clear as day.
Honestly, I keep thinking about that photo detail. It's one thing for a guy to tell tall tales about working for the government, but showing proof from the 70s is really different. I mean, he's sitting there in his white shirt and glasses looking like every other scientist in the room. If they really messed with his head to keep him quiet, it explains why he'd get so angry over something as simple as trash bag. That's a lot of hidden trauma to carry around while you're trying to mop floors at mall. I'm wondering about that poor guy's life. Seems like he's stuck.
The creator on here, I'll put her name on the screen, she made a video talking about a study that was done regarding researchers who went inside of prisons across 9 Latin American countries and sat down to conduct 97 interviews with men convicted of murdering their wives. She cited her sources, which were not only the results of that specific study, but many others. I read them and now I'm sharing because there is a pattern in these relationships beginning from the earliest stages leading all the way up to the murders. And hearing about it and realizing how common some of these things are, knowing what it led to, at least in these cases, is so scary. So the thing about this topic, at least in my personal opinion, is that when a man murders his wife, it's often talked about as if it was unpredictable, as if it came out of nowhere. A man snapped, things went too far, and nobody saw it coming. That is not what the research says, but shockingly, or perhaps not, the pattern of the warning signs, they are not physical, they are more psychological or emotional. In 2002, Lundy Bancroft published Why Does He Do That?, a book that he spent over 15 years working on by directly speaking to thousands of men in counseling groups. What he conducted was that their behavior was not caused by anger issues, stress, or mental illness. Instead, he found that it stems from a mindset of entitlement, of men who believe that they have the right to control their partners and they choose tactics to enforce that control. He described the anatomy as a tree, saying it, quote, grows from attitudes and values, not feelings. The roots are ownership, the trunk is entitlement, and the branches are control, end quote. And that is what makes it hard before it happens to say, yes, this man is going down the path that will likely lead him to murdering his wife, because these men do sometimes show good qualities, including times of kindness, warmth, humor, especially in the early stages of the relationship. The man may be adored by all of his family and friends. He may have a successful work life and have no problems with his mental health, but it's the possessiveness that is at the core of his mindset. On some level, he feels that he owns his partner and therefore has the right to treat her as he sees fit. And the deeper the relationship gets, the worse it tends to become. 5 years after Lundy Bancroft's book, socialist Evan Stark took the framework even further. In his 2007 book, Coercive Control, Stark defined coercive control as a course of malicious conduct over time in which a person uses both violent and non-violent means to secure dominance. The tactics include threats, intimidation and stalking, isolation, humiliation and manipulation, micromanagement and control over money and other basic necessities. And crucially, Stark described coercive control as a liberty crime. Not a crime of physical injury, but a crime that strips a woman of her family, her friends, her freedom, and everything that makes her her. And by the way, I think a lot of this isn't groundbreaking information. I feel like we have heard these things before, but it's interesting to see it from like more of a scientific point of view, I guess, like from a study that has actual research behind it. Anyway, he stated that that kind of control makes the victim feels like she has no outside to escape to, because the supposed safe place is her home, her relationship, her children, her family, her husband. Yet when the safe place is also the dangerous place, say for example your home, it makes it hard for the brain to identify what is danger and what is not, leading female victims to just feel like they're entrapped and alone. In 2021, Professor Jane Mong-Tong Smith published In Control: Dangerous Relationships and How They End in Murder. Jane is a former police officer and professor of public protection who spent years analyzing intimate partner. Her central argument was that murderers do not just snap and lose control. Her research led to the creation of an 8-stage timeline, laying out identifiable stages in which coercive relationships escalate to murder. The 8 stages are a history of control or stalking, not necessarily a criminal history, but a mindset and a tendency to dominate. The commitment whirlwind, where everything from the first meeting moves at an unhealthy, fast pace. Living with control, a trigger, escalation, a change in thinking, planning, and finally the murder. She makes it painstakingly clear that these homicides are not isolated incidents, nor are they crimes of passion where someone just lost it. They are deliberately, they are well thought out. And an intimate partner Victims are overwhelmingly women, 82% of them. Men are significantly more likely to murder their wives than women are to murder their husbands. And out of these 8 stages, the one that stands out to me the most is stage 6, the change in thinking, because that is when a person, often facing either separation, divorce, or the loss of his sense of control, shifts from trying to control his partner to planning to end her life. It does not look like violence from the outside. It actually often looks calm, like withdrawal, like he has accepted things, but he's accepted nothing. His way of thinking is changing and then leading into planning. In 2003, Dr. Jacqueline Campbell published the results of a study regarding men who murder their wives. That study spanned 11 cities. It compared 220 women who had been murdered by their partners and over 300 women who were currently in toxic, unhealthy relationships. What Campbell found were clear, measurable, predictable risk factors, things that, when present, dramatically increased the likelihood that a man would murder. The risk factors included previous threats with a weapon, stalking, having a stepchild in the home, women telling their controlling partners that they plan to leave. And in regards to women telling their controlling partner that they want to leave, the study showed that only about half of the women who were murdered were able to accurately assess that they were at risk of losing their life, meaning that only half of them made it aware that they were afraid of their partners, versus the other half, who were the women that didn't say anything or didn't try to leave, even if they did think that they could be in danger. The reason for that being is that they believed that leaving can often feel like the most dangerous thing that you can do. Then there's the May 2025 study in which researchers conducted 97 open-ended interviews with incarcerated men in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, Mexico, Paraguay, and Venezuela. That study was published and it made a lot of researchers just pause for a moment, not because the findings were entirely surprising, but because of how specific they were. The researchers that took part in this study had gone inside of prisons themselves to speak to the men that had been convicted of murdering their wives face to face. That study was titled Flying Under and Through the Radar, and putting information collected from that showed, again, a very detailed, disturbing pattern. And I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself, but part of the purpose of the analysis was to examine the chronological development of these relationships, tracing each case from its earliest stages leading to the murders. And again, what was found was that they were not random, impulsive acts, but instead a calculated, this time 7-step playbook used across 9 different countries, different cultures, different languages, with a consistency that you simply can't ignore. These 7 tactics were social isolation, gaslighting, restricting employment, vilifying external threats, creating male-peer alliances, body territorializing, and disrupting healthcare access. Let's go through every single one. Social isolation came first, cutting her off from her family, her friends, and anyone who might notice that something was wrong. This checks out directly with what Bancroft identified 2 decades earlier and what Stark described as the structural machinery of coercive control. Gaslighting followed, systematically dismantling her confidence in her own perception. One man from Mexico put it this way, quote, "If you go to the police or you talk to your sister, it's because you don't trust me." So in a single sentence, he reframed her seeking help as an act of betrayal. She was not a woman in danger reaching out to her sister. Instead, he made her feel like she was being a disloyal wife. This is gaslighting in its most dangerous form because it doesn't just confuse the victim. It pretty much just closes every single door that she might try to open to get out. Restricting employment, that meant that a woman had no financial independence. No money means no independence, and no independence means no escape. These men didn't want their wives working, not because they were providers, but because financial dependence was a cage. A woman who cannot pay for a bus ticket, a hotel room, a lawyer, cannot leave. Next is vilifying external threats. So framing every potential helper, every neighbor, every friend, every relative as an enemy, preemptively discrediting anyone who might try to intervene or later testify against the man. Which leads us into what research has described as among the most significant male peer alliances. All of the men spoke about receiving male support, whether it was telling a friend about how terrible they were to their wives or just creating close relationships with male friends who would take the man's side over the women's if need be. One man from Argentina, 40 years old, described it plainly, saying that his friend knew about how terrible he was to his wife, but because the friend knew, he also knew that if the wife was to make a formal claim, they would both be facing consequences. So instead, the friend took his side. If the wife would have gone to the authorities, both of them stood to lose. So both of them worked together to make sure that she never got the opportunity to report it. His friend then helped him murder his wife. Body territorializing came next, typically escalating later in the relationship, controlling what she she wore, where she went, whether she could leave the house or not, controlling everything that had to do with her own body. And finally, disrupting healthcare access. One man from Chile, aged 41, said that he made his wife feel like her going to the hospital was something that she would be doing just to hurt him. He convinced her that her going to report her injuries meant that she was manipulating him, because then the hospital staff would think that he was a bad guy. Another man from Bolivia said something similar. He told his wife that her going to the hospital would make him feel insecure. And she didn't want to make him feel insecure because then she knew that she would pay for that at home, resulting in her then stopping seeking medical help. In simple terms, the men made themselves the victims in the situation, using reverse psychology to make their wives feel like reporting their injuries meant that they were betraying their husbands, when in reality what they were doing was making sure that anyone who could have helped them in the healthcare system never saw her. So what all of this tells us is that the path and the pattern that leads to men murdering their wives is not a clear one, and a lot of times it's not a physical one. It shows up in jealousy, ownership, entitlement, isolation, financial control, use of children as leverage, and the belief that his partner's life is theirs to control. And more oftentimes than not, it also comes with the support from other men, or men who just choose to look the other way. Crazy. And by the way, I'm not making this video to be like, I hate men. There are good men in the world. I love my dad. I love my fiance. Good men exist. True love in a marriage does exist. I just thought this was so fascinating and so scary.
Some people can just hide such a dark side behind a normal life, and it's enough to keep anyone up at night. That 8-stage timeline she talked about is just so heavy to dwell on, especially the bit where the guy suddenly gets all calm and quiet right before he does it. You would imagine things would be getting louder and more obvious, but instead it's just cold silence. It's as if a trap is closing and you wouldn't even know it. These men literally building a cage around their wives, then acting like the heroes. It's just a lot to process all at once.
He wakes up in his hotel room with strange marks on his arm and no memory of the night before after partying with 2 girls. Let this story be a lesson as to why you shouldn't party with strangers. This story, which allegedly is true, came from somebody named Alex, and he says a few years ago he was working for a small independent record label, and his boss was sending him to South by Southwest, and Alex was pretty low on the totem pole at his job. He had just graduated from school, and this was his first chance at proving himself in a work, conference, festival setting. So he was really excited. But a few weeks before he goes to this festival, he's at a work happy hour, and his boss's wife pulls him aside, and she's like, hey, I know you're going to be at South by Southwest, and my niece and her friend are actually going to be there, and I want to give them your number if you're okay with it. You're all around the same age. I think you guys would really get along. They live in a different city, but these 2 girls are beautiful. She's kind of trying to hook it up, and Alex is single. He's like, what else do I have to lose? Most of the people that were going to be at the conference from his job were a lot older than him, so he was perfectly fine with meeting these girls. His boss's wife shows him a photo of the 2 girls, and they are beautiful. We'll call them Cassie and Marla. I don't know. And he's really interested in Cassie, which is the niece's friend. He was like, yeah, sure, give them my number. And so he starts texting the niece, and the niece is going back and forth with him. But a few days after they initially exchange contact information, she actually texts him, hey, change of plans. We're not going to go anymore. I'm selling our passes. And he's like, oh, bummer, whatever. They don't talk after that. Okay. So fast forward, he goes to the festival. He does all of his work obligations. They're there for a few days. And on the last night he was there, he went kind of hard, and him and all of his coworkers were at a bar after all of their work obligations were done. And his coworkers, who were a little bit older, they end up leaving the bar early, but he didn't want to go back to his hotel. So he ends up staying out of the bar. He's partying. He's just kind of mingling with the crowd. And out of the corner of his eye, he sees these 2 girls waving at him. And he looks over and they approach him, and they looked familiar, but he couldn't place them. And he was like, sorry, do I know you? And they're like, oh, we're your boss's wife's niece and friend. We were talking to you a few weeks ago, but we told you we weren't going to make it, but we changed plans. We did make it. Crazy to run into you. And he was like, oh, I'm happy that you guys are here. You should have texted me. And they're like, yeah, sorry, time kind of got away from us at the festival. That had initially caught him off guard, but these girls also seemed like they had been partying. They seemed a little bit intoxicated too, and he was happy to have somebody who he sort of knew, I guess, at this festival on his last night in town. So he was like, cool, do you guys want to do a shot? And they all go to the bar and they do a shot, and they continue partying together. Night goes on, it's getting late, the bars are shutting down, and the girls are like, do you want to come back to our hotel room? We have a bottle there, we can continue the party. And he's like, sure. In retrospect, it was probably a bad idea, especially because it was the boss's wife's niece, but what else was I going to do? And their hotel was only a few blocks from where he was staying, so he was like, cool, I'll go there, and then I'll go back to my hotel afterward. As they're walking back, he is really hitting it off with the friend, Cassie. Cassie says she's a nurse, she lives in Chicago, she's just here for the festival, she doesn't have any connection to music or the music industry whatsoever. They're flirting, but everything is innocent. But when they get back to the hotel, before they go up the elevator, at one point Marla turns around and she's like, I don't mean to be too forward, but Cassie's super into you. She's been talking about you since my aunt showed us your photo. It's fate that you guys are finally meeting here, even though we didn't think we were going to make it. This makes Alex feel good. So they go back up to the room. Everybody's still drinking. Everybody's still partying. They do have a bottle up there. They're passing it around. They're doing shots. And then things started to get hazy for him. But to be fair, he said he had been drinking for several hours at that point. And the last thing he remembered before he completely blacked out was Cassie asking him if he had ever heard of the Carter brothers. And he was like, no. And he said the memory of this is hazy, so he did have to look this up to fill in the blanks. But basically, the Carter brothers are this legend in Louisiana about these two brothers in the 1930s. And these men had claimed to be vampires, okay? They were keeping people in their basement, and one of their hostages had escaped, flagged down police, and told the police these two guys were keeping a number of people in their basement. So the police raided, they found all these people, they released the hostages, and then they waited for the brothers to get back. And the brothers were apparently not these people, but instead they were opening up their wrists and drinking the liquid that ran through their veins. And they were keeping them alive so that they could feed off of them. And when the police raided and finally caught them, the brothers admitted it. They said, yes, we're vampires. Please execute us. If you don't execute us, we will continue doing this. And so the police obliged. They put them on trial. They were convicted and sentenced to death. Well, a few years later, apparently their tomb was opened up and both of their bodies were missing. Now, this story is not verifiable, okay? This is just like an urban legend, but this is what these girls are talking about right before Alex blacks out. The last thing he can remember is Cassie laughing open mouth, like right next to him on the bed. And then that was it. He wakes up the next morning. He's back in his hotel room. He's fully clothed. He has his wallet. Everything is as it should be. He's alone, except for now he has a horrible hangover. Dry mouth, sore body, all of the signs of just partying way too hard. And he was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I did last night. I am so embarrassed. I hope nobody from my job finds out. Looks at his phone. He did not have Cassie's number, but he did have Marla's number. Marla had not texted him. And he was like, I hope I didn't do something embarrassing. Had body aches all over, but he was like, I just felt like the most hungover that I remember feeling. So I just turned over and I went back to bed and I didn't really think of it. Woke up later that afternoon. He said he walked out, got some food, and then pretty much just spent the rest of that night in his hotel room because he had a flight out the next day, but he didn't do anything fun. He thought about texting Marla to check in on them, but thought, again, he may have done something embarrassing and he wanted to wait to see if they would text him, but they didn't. So he catches his flight. Okay, he goes back to the city where he lives. He gets back and he's still completely exhausted and completely sore. And he notices on the inside of his elbow, he has 3 little marks that look like bug bites. And he's like checking his luggage because he's like, did the hotel have bed bugs? He doesn't find anything, and he said he checked the rest of his body and he didn't have any other bites, so he just figured a bug must have bit him while he was out partying, or he must have scratched himself. Doesn't think much of it, right? Goes to sleep that night and he has a dream about Cassie, and she's standing at the foot of his bed and she's in the same clothes that she was wearing at South by Southwest when he met her, a black tank top and cut off jean shorts. He said the dream felt so real. She was standing at the end of the bed and she was smiling at me. He said in the dream, she got on the bed and she started crawling toward him, and he jumped up because it was like creepy the way that she was looking at him. He said he was like in a cold sweat, but he thought it was still just the hangover and the body exhaustion from working and partying all week. These dreams continue, and he's having this dream about Cassie standing at the foot of his bed like once or twice a week for the next few weeks. But he still does not hear from these girls. He thought about reaching out a few times, but decided ultimately if they wanted to talk to him, they would have reached out. About a month after he gets back, he goes to a work happy hour again, and his boss's wife is there again, and she runs into him and she's like, oh, how was South by Southwest? You know, did you have a good time at your first festival? And he had always liked his boss's wife. He said she was very approachable and very nice. And he was like, yeah, I had a great time. And he was kind of gauging to see if she had heard anything about his drunken night with her niece. So he's like, also, I met your niece the last night I was in town, and we had a really good time together. They were really nice girls. His boss's wife looks at him strangely and she's like, they didn't go. He was like, oh yeah, no, they told me they weren't going to go, but then I actually did end up running into them. And she's like, no, they went to Europe, or at least my niece went to Europe. Her sister lives there. She's a foreign exchange student, and their parents decided to surprise them last minute and they bought flights. And so that's why she wasn't at South by Southwest. Like, she wasn't in Austin. Alex was like, are you sure? Because I'm pretty sure I met them the last night in town. And she's like, no, like, that's my sister's daughter. Like, I know that they were in Europe. Alex is like, okay, weird. So he doesn't say anything else about it to the boss's wife because he doesn't want to be weird. But then that night he gets home and he texts Marla. And he was like, hey, Marla, you know, I just wanted to check in on you guys. Are you guys feeling normal again after the festival and after getting home? Are you settled back into your routine? How's Cassie? She texts him back pretty much immediately, and she just sends him a question mark. He goes, who is this? He's like, it's Alex, who you guys hung out with at South by Southwest, like your aunt's husband's employee that works for so-and-so. And she was like, I think you have the wrong number. I didn't go to South by Southwest. Like, I remember texting you, but I told you we weren't going. I was in Europe. I said, I genuinely did not know what to think at that moment. I just stopped texting her because I didn't want to like freak her out or freak myself out anymore. But I did find her social media account. I looked at it. She had posted photos in Europe visiting her sister at the time that I was supposedly with her. It bothered him. So the next night he goes out and he said he got wildly drunk again. And he said, I know that that's probably not a healthy way to cope or deal with it, but I was just trying to figure this out. So I went out with my friends. I was talking to them about it. Nobody could find a reasonable explanation for what happened or who these two girls were that I met. And his friend's like, well, why don't you take me back to that night? Tell me everything that happened, like from the beginning to what you remember. And that's when Alex says that he remembered something that he hadn't remembered upon initially waking up. He's in a bathtub with what seemed to be an IV bag, the tube that was hooked into his arm. And he remembers Cassie brushing the hair away from his forehead and saying, shh, it won't hurt. It'll be over soon. You're not going to remember this. He tells his friend this. His friend's like, I don't know. That sounds like you could just be trying to connect the dots between what they were telling you about that vampire legend right before you blacked out. But Alex is like, where did that memory come from? And they end up looking up where nurses would draw blood from. And it's consistent with where the marks were on his arm. The scariest thing about all of this is he's not sure if that's something that actually happened to him or if it's just his mind filling in the blanks. But the dreams of Cassie haven't stopped. He said he's sharing this in an attempt to warn people to be careful who you party with, who you go home with, even if you're a man. Ultimately said that he's still bothered by the idea that he can't figure out how these two people that he met were supposedly the people that he was supposed to be meeting, but weren't them at all.
Wait, he actually saw the marks on his arm after waking up? That's way too close for comfort. 3 little dots, right where a nurse would draw blood. I'd be at the doctor's office in a heartbeat. And then he has those dreams of her standing by his bed in the exact same outfit he wore at night. I get the sense she's still watching him, even though she was supposedly thousands of miles away in Europe. Those details about the Carter brothers and the blood drinking are just pretty wild. I don't know who he met that night, but they definitely weren't his boss's niece and friend.
Listen to the sentence that's about to come out of my mouth, because I feel like the first time you hear this, you think there's no way that this is correct, but it is. This man played with a Ouija board, told his girlfriend that her 13-month-old baby was possessed, which led him to conduct what he called to be an exorcism, ending in one of the most distressing situations that I've heard to date. An exorcism on a 13-month-old baby, 30 hours of inexplicable pain, because a Ouija board told him to do so. We're talking about a child in today's video, so if you think that listening to this is going to harm your mental health in any way, shape, or form, please don't watch this video. I will see you in my next one. Trust me, guys, I know how heavy these cases can be, and I've said this a million times before. I would hate nothing more than for one of my videos to hurt your mental health. So I mean it when I say please take care of yourselves. I will see you in my next video if this isn't the right one for you. Love you. Jessica Carson was described to be a caring, loving mother of her daughter, Amora Carson. That was until 2007 when Jessica was 17 years old in high school and she met an 18-year-old man called Blaine Milam. By the time the two of them met, Jessica had obviously already had Amora, and you could say that Blaine stepped up to be a father figure, but that would be quite far off. Because sure, he was now involved in Amora's life, but what he brought to the table was just toxicity. Jessica and Blaine soon started dating. Some have described it to be a whirlwind romance. They went from dating to getting engaged to moving in together very quickly. Jessica and Amora first moved in with Blaine, which meant living with his mother because he was still living at home. And then they later moved out and ended up renting a mobile house of their own in Rusk County, Texas. But by them getting their own place, it only allowed Blaine to take control over their entire lives in the way that he wanted to. Blaine Milam was a very, very controlling person, like to a dangerous degree, and he would do things in their relationship to intentionally isolate Jessica from all of her family and friends until she felt like she only had him. Blaine was also an extremely jealous person to the point that he would never allow anyone really to come over to their place. The lighting is so weird, I'm sorry. He would never allow anyone to come over to their mobile home. He told Jessica that she wasn't allowed to leave unless she had his permission. And Jessica over time completely cut off any relationship that she had with any of her family and friends. A girl that was once described to be a happy, lively people person slowly started to fade away, which is really, really sad. And she became someone whose loved ones didn't even recognize anymore. She became a shell of a human being. She stopped caring about her look, her appearance, and she stopped taking care of herself, which only leads me to believe that she stopped taking care of Amora as well. Because if Jessica didn't care to take care of herself, I really doubt that she would put in the effort and the care that a baby needed, which makes me really sad to think about. But not only that, Jessica's loved ones also noticed a big shift in her personality, in the way that she used to be quiet and reserved and shy and and sweet at one point, but when she began dating this guy, she became really mean, really impatient, really angry. All of that led to constant arguments in their relationship, and Blaine also played a big part in influencing Jessica's religious beliefs. He was raised in the Pentecostal church, but he soon realized that was not what he believed in, so he switched over to believing in more occult practices and demonology. And with his influence, Jessica did as well, and they both completely immersed themselves into these beliefs. So much so that Blaine managed to convince Jessica that they had special powers, that they were able to communicate with people that had passed, and that his powers allowed him to have a special relationship with God that meant that God could talk to him and tell him what to do. He said God would give him orders on what to do and how to act. And throughout the course of their relationship, Jessica would often talk about her father, who she unfortunately very sadly lost when she was only 10 years old. She lost her father because unfortunately he did not want to be here anymore. It was his choice, and she was the person who found him, which was detrimental to her mental health because of course it was traumatizing. And then in 2008, Blaine lost his father. He was pretty close to his father, so losing him definitely took a pretty big toll on him, and his mental health as a result of that was not well at all. And he told his mom that the only thing that he wanted to do was to leave and go be with his father. And Jessica's mom thought that Blaine losing his father triggered something in Jessica from her post-trauma that she had from losing her dad when she was 10 years old. A friend of Jessica who saw her during this period of time said that she was just hollow and empty, and she was different. She said that looking into her eyes was like looking into a dark space, and that friend also had reasons to believe that Amora was not being properly taken care of. According to that friend, on one occasion when she was allowed to go and visit Jessica, when she got there, she saw that Amora had not been bathed in over a week, and she noticed that Jessica wasn't really doing anything, and that instead Blaine was the one changing diapers and feeding her, etc. But he was doing the bare minimum, if that. In the spring of 2008, Jessica and Blaine decided to go out and buy a Ouija board because one day Blaine suggested that they try to contact Jessica's father through the Ouija board, and she agreed. They went out, they bought it, they got back to their place, sat around to use it. They played with the board for, I don't know if it was the first night, but at one night they played with the board for 8 hours, which is crazy. And Jessica eventually started to believe that she was getting the answers to the questions that she had that she needed from her dad through the Ouija board. And one of the things the board said was that Jessica's mom was the one responsible for Jessica's dad's passing, and it told Jessica that she could find peace in that if she, quote, did something about it. Following that, Jessica started to get pretty freaked out in their home because she thought that the house was haunted and or that there were evil spirits in her house. I think the actual word she used to describe her house was that it was possessed, and it scared her a lot. But from now on, things just go downhill quickly. Jessica and Nora Blaine are doing well mentally. They're supposed to be raising and nurturing and taking care of this precious little innocent baby, but they're not. On top of that, they're doing nothing but laying around all day. They started to think that people they know are possessed. And to add to everything, they begin taking substances. So they're not in a good situation by any means, but they're also not doing absolutely anything to help themselves. December 2nd of 2008 was a Tuesday. That day, both Jessica and Blaine had been taking an excessive amount of substances, and Blaine told Jessica that he had received a revelation from God. According to him, God told him that Amora, 13-month-old Amora, was possessed by a demon named Martha, whose sole mission was to end their lives. He told Jessica that he knew that this was true because Amora started walking earlier than babies were supposed to, earlier than babies her age usually would, so in his eyes that meant that Amora was possessed. And he was also told by God that the demon Martha had taken over Amora because of Jessica's actions, and he said that God was, quote, sick of it. And apparently God told him that they needed to perform an exorcism on Amora to get the demon out of her. And how did they do that? Well, they used a hammer on Amora to attempt to physically get the demon out of her. They used it on her so many times that her entire body was covered in injuries to the point that it looked like one big giant injury. She had so many injuries on her that there were hardly any space between them, making it look like one massive one. For 30 hours, Blaine used a hammer, his hands, a wrench, and other objects. And afterwards, Jessica and Blaine went out. They left Amora, deceased, alone, while they went to a pawn shop to try and exchange some tools for money. Then they stopped by a gas station because why not? And eventually later that morning at 10:37 in the morning, when they finally returned back home, Blaine called 911 to report that he had just found his 13-month-old deceased. And when paramedics arrived, they were shocked, to say the least. Amora's little body was left alone in the bathroom in a horrific state on the floor. She was covered in human bite marks from head to toe. Those matched Blaine and Jessica's teeth. She had 18 rib fractures, multiple skull fractures. Her brain was torn, a broken arm, a broken leg, her ribs and sternum were broken. And the force used on her was so strong and so terrible that the organs inside of her little body were damaged. And as if that was not brutal enough, there were also clear injuries proving that brutal SA had taken place. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it was just about as bad as it could get. The medical examiner was unable to determine exactly which injury caused her to lose her life because there were that many, and he ruled her cause of death as homicidal violence, saying that he had never seen injuries of that nature being that horrific. Inside of the trailer, investigators also found red stains all over the bedroom wall, red stained bedding and red stained baby clothes, a red stained diaper, and red stained jeans and baby wipes. All of that was taken in as evidence, and it was later confirmed that a lot of, if not all of those red stains came from Amora's injuries. Jessica and Blaine were the only ones in that house with Amora, and Jessica asked the authorities what kind of monster would do something like this to her daughter. Blaine, on the other hand, cool, calm, collected. He did not seem stressed at all. He was more than willing to cooperate with police, even offering up names of people who he thought would be capable of committing such a crime. Blaine's story was that the two of them had left Amora home alone for an hour, which is already concerning because she was a baby, but he said that when they returned, they found her in that way, and he had no idea what could have happened. We later find out that morning, Blaine called his sister at 9:30 a.m. to let her know that he had just found Amora deceased, and yet he did not make that 911 call until an entire hour later at 10:37 in the morning. Despite Jessica and Blaine playing dumb, they were both arrested and charged for the death of Amora. When they were questioned, at first, they denied everything. They were acting like they had no idea what had happened. Blaine was holding on strongly to his lies, but Jessica eventually cracked, and she told them everything, telling investigators that her daughter was possessed, that Blaine was possessed. She admitted that she heard Blaine doing everything he did to Amora, telling investigators that she heard her daughter's screams, and told them that she turned on the TV in the living room for her to watch a movie to draw out the sounds of Amora screaming. She said, quote, "I heard the demon cry out and scream out," end quote, and that she would, quote, "rather the child go to heaven now than spend a life with Satan having her soul," end quote. She admitted to them that she saw Amora's deformed head and said that she encouraged Blaine to do whatever he had to do to get the demon out of her. Blaine did not confess to detectives, but he did later on confess to a nurse in jail, telling her, quote, "I'm going to confess I did it, but Miss Shirley, the Blaine you did not do this. My dad told me to be a man, and I've been reading my Bible. Please tell Jessica I love her," end quote. Jessica and Blaine both had their own trial. They both pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Thankfully, the jury saw right through it and found them both guilty. Blaine was sentenced to death, and Jessica was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. It breaks my heart into two when people lose their minds and a child, a baby, suffers because of it.
That 30 hours that poor baby spent in pain is impossible to wrap my head around. I can't get over how a mother could just sit there and turn off the TV to drown out her old child's scream. It's like she wasn't even there anymore. The way they thought a 1-year-old was possessed just because she started walking early is some of the most backwards logic I've ever had. You'd expect a parent to be proud of that, but instead, they saw it as something evil. Then they just went to a pawn shop and a gas station like everything was normal. That's a kind of mean spirits I'll never understand.
Papa needed to go recharge in his mental space. But the bad papa had control of him. Good papa didn't know that he was under a trance. Bad papa out here calling shots with the bad vampire man who trying to kill all the humans off because they sick of the humans taking over all the space on the earth. Of course, I'm the one who find them. And of course, I'm the one who got to figure out which is the good papa and the bad papa. And I'm not going to fraud you. Bitch, I do not know. Both of these niggas finna get blasted. You heard what the hell I said? I can't tell the damn difference. The spell that I'm finna use is gonna get rid of the bad papa, and the good papa, he gonna be hurt for a little while, but that's just a little bit of damage we gonna have to deal with. Boom. In come Miss Evangeline. She say something freaky to the papas. The good papa is like, "Yeah, bitch, you know your man, bitch." And the bad papa is like, "Y'all are fucking disgusting." And Miss Evangeline was like, "Yeah, you, bye, bitch." Threw some lavender liquid shit all over the bad papa. He went up in flames. Next thing you know, we here. Boom. Water just started spilling from the goddamn sink. I'm talking about room filling up fast as hell. I'm panicking. How the hell we get the fuck out of here? Miss Evangeline and Papa just standing there kissing and smoochy, smoochy, smoochy. You nasty bitches! Tell me how the fuck we get out of here. Miss Evangeline gonna tell me something. It ain't nowhere for us to go. I'm sorry, what? Papa say, "Yeah, you just gotta let it happen." Let what happen? What are we talking about? Because right now, all I see happening is we finna drown, we're gonna die. He said, yeah, no. I mean, well, yeah, it's going to feel like you drowning, but you're not going to drown. But that's how she communicate. Who the fuck is she? You better not say her name. Miss Evangeline gonna sit up here and say something, yeah, so because of who Papa family is and how they able to use telekinesis in order for her to communicate here, she gotta drown out the room. Listen, I ain't got time for this shit. I already died once. I just came close to death. And now you telling me I'm gonna have to drown? And she like, no, you just, it's gonna feel like you're drowning, but you're not drowning. You just gotta let it happen. Let what happen? You just gotta let the liquid fill up your lungs. So drown. I gotta drown. Get me the fuck out of here. Oh my God. You want me to be okay with her just flooding the room? Has this is normal? And Miss Evangeline and Papa gonna say something. Yeah, it's normal. And it's only one person who drowned. But I mean, it shouldn't happen to you. What? Now I'm even more panicked because if it's the person who I think they talking about was drowned by Oshun, they had the same type of relationship that me and her got. Oh Lord. Jesus Christ. Somebody other than Oshun, answer a prayer, please. I am literally freaking the fuck out. Like, baby, I'm done for. When I tell you the water is this close from the ceiling, bitch, I am like, oh fuck. Now as I'm trying to take my last little breaths of air, I see a bluish light coming from down below me. I look down and the Holy Mother and Papa and Evangeline just standing down there holding court. Why do I have to die in order to communicate with the gods? I don't understand the correlation. Y'all know what my slow ass did. I took a deep breath and I went down. I get to the bottom. She look at me and roll her damn eyes. You know what? If you wasn't a god, boy. Papa and Evangeline just standing there looking at me with the pole little tink tink. Don't fucking patronize me. The Holy Mother standing there, gonna sit up there and say something. Does this appease you? You could have did this the whole time. You just put me through a traumatic experience for what reason? Papa gonna say you not supposed to question the gods. I just got tortured for what? Oshun say, you know what? Listen, just listen. You saw the vampire. You know who he is. Yeah, I know who he is. She said, you know where he at. Yeah, I know where he at. Miss Evangeline instantly alerted. What you mean you know where he is? How do you know him? Kinda, sorta worked for him. Papa and Evangeline is giving pissed off parents. Absolute pissed off parents. And I don't like being in trouble. Papa say, I don't understand. How in the hell out of all of that, how you know them? And I'm gonna be real with you. Money get me into some strange places, okay? The things people are willing to pay for you to do, all I'm gonna say is somebody needed a babysitter, but they ain't had no babies. Don't judge me, judge your mammy. Any hoozy. I know where this man live. I know everything about this man's house. I know all the weak points in his security. You want to know how I know? Because while I was there, I made sure that I knew every possible way that I could get the fuck out of Dodge. Do you hear me? Every secret passage, every place that did not have a camera view for the security cameras, every window that actually worked versus being sealed shut or having bars on it, the doors that led to nowhere, the doors that did open, the doors that did not open. I knew it all, okay? I knew it all. And that's when it dawned on me. I knew it all. I know how to get in, and I know how to get out. You could have just asked. You could have just asked me to tell you exactly how to get in and get out. You could have just asked me to tell them how to get in and get out. Why you have to trick me into getting them in and getting them out? Oshun looked at me, she rolled her eyes, she said, if I would have really asked you to go in and show them how to get in and get out, would have really done it? Yes, as long as that meant that I didn't have to go with them. Why can't the guys just ask? My bad, you're gods. You know it all. You know it all before it even fucking happened. Which made me fucking sick. Oh my God. Ooh. Okay. Oshun say, bite your tongue. Project the damn image that I need you to project so they can understand what they need to understand. I just been through a torturous, tumultuous, hellish 2 weeks. And all of this could have been bypassed if you just would have sat down and said, hey, you got what I need up here, and I'm going to need you to go ahead on and give it to these other people, and we're going to make a full-blown plan, and ain't nobody gotta die, because hello, I died. Hello. Oshun said, yeah, right. And guess who else died? The bad papa. And guess what? The only way that I was going to be able to get you in here for us to be able to get rid of him is if we let him think that he had everything under control. You couldn't know nothing. That's why you don't question the gods. I died! Oshun, mad as fuck, grow 10 feet tall. She touching the fucking clouds. Everything turning black. She bellow at my ass. I know, and I'm going to repay you for it. Shut up and finish the job. Oh, so you did have a real reason for why you put me through so much. Who knew? Oh, wait, I'm sorry, you did. You got it, girl. My bad. Calm down. Papa say, I know I'm not supposed to question you, Holy Mother, but I got a question. Why you get rid of the demon side? She turned and looked at him, shrunk back down to size, all nice and pretty and just soft and blue. Don't say, my son, wasn't ideal that I would break you from the bonds of your father. That was one of the chains. He asks a question. He get nice, Oshun. I ask a question. I get bitch. What the fuck? Oshun hold out her hands. Papa and Miss Evangeline take one of the hands. She gets a chanting, and her hands is going, and clearly they're communicating. But why am I being left out?
I'd be really freaking out if the water was rising that fast and everyone else was just standing there like it's totally normal. And then to hear that you have to let the liquid fill your lungs just to talk to God, that's definitely not how I want to spend my afternoon. Miss Evangeline and Papa are just kissing while everything is flooding, which is just messy, I mean. Then Oshun turns into this 10-foot giant touching the clouds and starts yelling. I wouldn't even know how to react in that situation at all. It sounds like it would be hard to handle. I'd just freeze up.
Another female serial killer, and actually the last female serial killer of this entire series. Every single state has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple, and this series is almost done, and in it I've covered multiple different women. Today I'm going to tell you guys about the worst serial killer from West Virginia, and we know that female serial killers are only about 16% of all serial killers, and many times they work alongside men or their accomplices, and so it's not common to have just a solo female serial killer, but in West Virginia they had one, and she was absolutely terrible. If you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered. I think in this series we've covered 2 other people that are very similar to her, where they were like nurses and they killed their patients. One was called the Angel of Death. And this girl that I'm about to tell you about was also a nurse, and she also killed her patients. She specifically targeted elderly veteran patients. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about Retta Mays. And this was actually pretty recent. So Retta was born in West Virginia in 1975 and was in the Army National Guard for a while, and then she was deployed to Iraq and Kuwait, so some pretty intense places to be deployed. After her service, she ended up working as a corrections officer at a jail for a while, and actually it's reported, and there was some sort of like lawsuit or trial or something that never fully went to completion, because allegedly she was being beaten regularly by one of the inmates at this corrections facility. Years later, in June of 2015, she ends up becoming a nursing assistant at the Lewis A. Johnson Veterans Medical Center. Now, how she got the job is beyond me. Clearly someone dropped the ball, they didn't do a good enough job, because Retta was unqualified for this job, and that is the understatement of a century. She didn't have any certification or license to care for a single patient, and yet somehow she's hired. She had no training. She was not authorized to be giving medications, but somehow was doing that all the time. And then 2 years into her job, again, no qualifications, and somehow she's there for 2 years already. She ends up getting assigned to the surgical wing of this hospital. After she starts working at the surgical wing at this hospital, people start suddenly having really weird things happening. A lot of elderly patients start suffering from mysterious drops in their blood sugar levels, and for many, it's killing them. No one knows why it's happening. Over the course of 11 months, at least 11 people have died due to hypoglycemia, which is very low blood sugar. And many of them were not insulin dependent. That's not how anyone would have expected them to pass. That's not a normal thing. So people working there are alarmed and terrified and confused, and at one point there's even an internal investigation at the hospital to figure it out, because one patient, his name was Archie Edgell, he was 84 years old, he was a Korean War veteran, he was hospitalized there, and then he all of a sudden ends up having a drop in his blood sugar, and it goes to 24. And by the way, in case you don't know anything about blood sugar or insulin or anything like that, anything less than 70 is considered a low blood sugar level. Anything less than 55 is considered dangerously low. If it's less than 40, you're likely to go into a coma. Sometimes people have like extreme confusion and seizures before that. His blood sugar level was below 24. He almost dies. Somehow the hospital staff ends up saving him and he survives. However, a few days later, after this, he ends up dying from the same thing happening again. And both times they have no idea why. It shouldn't have happened. He wasn't insulin dependent. His blood sugar should not have dropped like that, and they can't figure out why. And his body is sent for an autopsy. And this is when they discovered that he was injected 4 different times with insulin. And they are like, why? Who is doing that? That should not be happening. So at the time, this internal investigation is happening, but they don't really get any answers, unfortunately. In 2018, Retta ends up being fired, and it sounds like it's unrelated to this. I don't think they suspected her, or maybe they did, but they didn't have enough to fire her. I think she was fired just for other reasons. But just so you know, while she was working at this ward, in this wing of the hospital, in the surgical wing, a total of 112 patients died. Of those deaths, 66 of them experienced hypoglycemic events. It's thought that she potentially killed as many as 112 people, but kind of at minimum, it's thought she killed at least 66 of them. That is so many people. All older, elderly people who served our country. They're veterans. They are coming in for other things, and then they're dying from low blood sugar when that wasn't even an issue that they were dealing with. Eventually, the FBI ends up getting involved. They actually questioned her a couple times. She was questioned in that internal investigation into the hospital, and then she's questioned by the FBI. And they questioned her a couple times, and she denies any involvement. However, at some point, they're like, we're pretty sure it's Retta, and they start to build a case against her. So they realize that she's regularly searching female serial killers on her phone. She is constantly watching the Netflix series Nurses That Kill, and one episode literally focused on insulin injections being the reason that people were dying. And that is how most of the people that died in her hospital were killed. Plus, they were able to access her phone calls to her husband, who was in prison for child-related charges. So she's calling him multiple times to complain about her job. At one point, she says that she wants to strangle her patients. She says that she's sore from trying to resuscitate a patient and that she wished they would have just had a DNR, which is do not resuscitate. But if they had done a DNR, she wouldn't have had to touch him, and he would have just slipped into a coma and died once his blood sugar hit a certain level. Basically implying that she injected him and was just waiting for him to die. The investigation, in the end, having more than 300 interviews with her, with other people, witnesses, family members, everything. They reviewed the phone calls, her social media, her computer records, and she was not good at hiding what she was doing. And so they had lots of evidence against her. Between forensic experts, endocrinologists, which are people who would know what is going on with insulin and blood sugar and all these different things, and they ended up exhuming some of the bodies, some of the believed victims. They look at hospital records, they look at the visitor logs, they look at literally everything they possibly could have. And finally, they announced in 2019 that they have a persons of interest. Finally, in 2020, Retta Mays is their suspect, their main only suspect. And she has been for quite a while. They just didn't announce it right away as they were building this case against her. In 2020, she is caught, arrested, and charged. She was charged with 7 life terms plus 20 years. even though they believe she actually killed many more people, like I said, anywhere from like 66 to upwards of like 112 people, with the potential even for more that we don't know about. She is still alive and incarcerated to this day. Right now, she's incarcerated in Alabama. Unfortunately, we don't have confirmation of all the people she would have killed. It would be hard to go back and figure out if someone died from natural causes or from her killing them. It's hard to tell years later. However, we do know that in 2017, she killed Archie Edgold, the first man I was telling you about. And then a few months later, on July 19th or 20th of 2017, she killed Robert Edge Sr., who was a Navy veteran of the Korean War. And then she killed, in January of 2018, Robert Kuzol, who was 89, and he was also a veteran of the Korean War. On March 25th or 26th, she killed George Shaw Sr. He was 81, and he was an Air Force veteran. On April 3rd or 4th, she killed William Holloway, who was 96, and he was a U.S. Army veteran of World War II. And then a few days later, she killed Felix McDermott, who was 82, and he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. And then on June 3rd or 4th, she killed Raymond Goldman, who was 88, and he was a veteran of the Army and the Air Force, and he served in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And finally, she killed Russell R. Posey Sr. He was 92 years old. He was a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II. The medical examiner was not able to conclusively confirm that insulin that she had injected him with was the direct cause of his death. So they actually had charged her with 8 counts of murder, but she was only sentenced to 7 because he's the one that they couldn't conclusively prove. But she was charged for 1 count of assault and intent to commit murder in connection to his death. In total, like I said, she probably killed way more people, and she ended up having this sob story saying she felt so bad for the family's victims and she's so sorry and yada 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 in trial, but I just don't believe her. She was a horrible person, clearly. She not only murdered people, she didn't care what her husband did either. And so just a terrible, evil person. She was preying on elderly people who served our country, elderly people who were coming for care in their final years, and she killed them.
This woman didn't even have a license to touch patients. It blows my mind that she got a job at a hospital where she could just walk in and start giving people shots. She was watching a Netflix show about killers while she was actually doing the same thing to people. I feel so bad for those veterans and their families. They survived wars only to have their nurse hurt them when they were old and vulnerable. A blood sugar level of 24 is basically death sentence. She knew exactly what she was doing. I don't know how anyone could be that cruel and empty.
The story that I'm gonna tell you, honestly, it creeps the fuck out of me still when I think about it. So, growing up, I didn't really grow up with my grandparents. We would go visit them, when we went to Mexico and stuff, and on vacation. And I remember really spending a lot of time with my mom's mom, but with my dad's mom, we hardly ever spent time. And I remember my mom always being so cautious, be careful what you eat when you go to your grandma's house. Don't get everything. But for some reason, my grandma had a really, really strong connection with me, I guess. I remember her always telling me oh, you look so much like your dad. But she would always kind of single my little sister out oh, but your sister looks like your mom so much. And I remember she would grab my face and be oh, you're so beautiful, you look just like my son. And so me and my sister would joke around about it, oh, you're the favorite one, but I never really took it it was whatever. So I used to work in a warehouse when my oldest daughter she was a year and a half, and I had found out that just recently, I remember when I was working, I found out that then I was pregnant with my son. So I remember working a graveyard shift, and I remember not telling anybody because I work with mostly guys, and I'm they don't need to know about my business or whatever. And I must have been a month pregnant. So I remember getting off of work, and I felt so uneasy, I had a feeling, I don't know, something bad was gonna happen, and I remember I couldn't sleep. But before I even went to go lay down, I remember looking at the end of the hallway. I get there, right, and I'm gonna go to my room, but the hallway was so dark, and I remember I was about to turn on the light, and I stayed looking at the end of the hallway, and I remember seeing this really dark, a human figure, right? And I got so tripped the fuck out. I was what the fuck is that? And I turn on the light, and there's nothing there. So then I try to go to sleep or whatever, and mind you, I must have slept for 2 hours. And then I had this sudden urge to call my mom. So I remember I called my mom, and I was hey mom, what are you doing? And she's I'm so glad you called. I'm what happened? And she's your grandma just passed away. And I remember I was like, what the fuck? And I told my mom what had happened, you know, how I had seen that figure at the end of the hallway. And my mom jokingly was like, oh, she probably want to say goodbye to you. You know, she probably, you know, dio su despedida, like said her goodbyes. And it kind of stuck with me, right? So mind you, remember I work graveyard at this warehouse. And so I remember walking into HR office, and I wish I could see this girl. I mean, I wish I could reach out to her, or she could reach out to me if she ever were to see my videos. I remember walking into the HR, and she's like, hey, like try to approach me. She's like, can I tell you something? But I don't want you to feel uncomfortable what I'm going to tell you. And I'm thinking in my head, what the fuck is she going to tell me? You know? And I remember she's like, oh, it like terrifies me when I think about it, because everything that happened after was so fucking scary. I remember her like telling me, you know, it's gonna sound awkward, blah blah. Cut the story short, she's like, somebody walked in with you. And I'm like, the fuck? I walked in by myself, you know? She's like, no, it was an older lady that just passed away. And I remember looking at her like, what the fuck are you talking about? And she's like, starts describing my grandma to me. When she told me this, I felt like my heart dropped, you know? I'm like, how the fuck does she know? And so she tells me that, and then she's like, but she can't rest. Like, she needs to tell you something. And I'm like, tell me what? Like, you can't tell me? You know? And she's like, no, like, your grandma needs to tell you. And I remember I was like, no, like, I don't want her to come to me. Like, how is she gonna come to me in a dream? Like, I was starting to trip. Because, mind you, when my grandma passed away, the way I remember her, like, no, I was so terrified, honestly, when she passed away. Like, I didn't want her to come back to me like that. She was very old already when she passed away, but her skin was so fragile. Like, if you picked her up, like, literally her skin would rip wherever she was, like, picked up from. So she's like, she's gonna come to you, blah blah. And I'm like telling her, like, no, like pleading, like, no, I don't want her to come to me. Like, I sound like a crazy person. And so she's like, but she's not coming to you right now, you know? And she's like, when you have your son. When she told me that, I was already tripping, you know? This just like threw me overboard, right? And so she's like, yeah, when you have your son. I hadn't told anybody I was pregnant, let alone I didn't even know what I was having. So I remember every night, like, praying to God, like, please don't let her come to me. Please, I'm terrified of her. Like, I don't want her to come. God, like, I would pray for her every night. Like, I was literally terrified of her. And the day comes where I have my son, right? So I'm continuing to pray every night for her, like, lighting candles for her. And I'm like, please don't come. Please don't ever come. I don't care what you did. Like, I don't want to know what you have to tell me. Like, why are you choosing me? Like, choose somebody else. Like, and I remember telling the same girl that told me that, and I'm like, can she choose somebody else? Like, and she's like, no, because she knows you're strong and you're going to be able to handle what she's going to tell you. And that stuck in my head, and I remember just like losing it, to be honest. And I don't know, I felt like so uncomfortable my whole pregnancy because I just was waiting for her to arrive. So I ended up having my son, and at that time my daughter had her own room, but she would sleep in a little toddler bed in my room. So the toddler bed was right next to my bed, and I remember like breastfeeding my son. Tell me why. This is when I think about it, it's so terrifying, to be honest. Like, I really hope she doesn't ever come back. Because my daughter's sitting in her toddler bed, and she kind of like sits up, and she's like not fully awake, right? So she's sitting up, and her eyes, they're like not open, but she's like, I don't know if she's trying to open them or rolling back, but I'm tripping the fuck out. I see her sit up, and then she's like, Kukui, kukui. Bitch. Kukui? You know, I'm like, kukui, and I'm like calling her name, like, wake up, wake up. But let me give you a little background. When my daughter, when I was changing my daughter's diaper, right, we had a picture of my grandma in a spare room at my mom's house. And I remember how she like looked up at the picture, and she was like, kukui, kukui, pointing at my grandma's picture. And I'm like, kukui? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, kukui is like something scary, right, in Spanish. And I'm like, telling like my mom, come here, look what she's saying. And mom's like, what the fuck? Like, why would she say that? So when my daughter sat up in the bed and she was saying that, in my heart, I knew it was my grandma. And I was like, I can't do anything for you, you know, like, I'm not the person. But it made me so angry to think that she was like going after my daughter. So I like start cussing a storm, you know, and like, get the fuck out of my fucking room, blah blah. Like, my mom has always told me, like, if you see something, a spirit, like, you're supposed to curse it, right? Curse at it and supposedly it leaves. I don't know if it's true, but it worked. Like, when I said that, like, I remember as I was saying it, I could see my daughter's eyes, like, her whole, like, her eyes, her head, everything started turning, like, to the side. Oh my god, it's so fucking scary when I think about it. It started like turning and turning, like as if it's like watching this thing walk out of the room. I literally fucking died in that second. And I'm like, I start tripping the fuck out, you know? And I'm like, you know, calling my daughter's name. I'm like, wake up, you know, wake up. Mind you, she's like 2 now. And I'm like literally so pissed off. And like I start crying, and I'm like holding my daughter, and I'm like holding my son, you know? And I'm like, why would you come? I was more pissed off at that. I'm like, why would you come and scare my daughter? Or like, I felt like she was being selfish, even though it was like her afterlife. Because after my grandma passed, like a lot of things surfaced about things that she did, like while she was alive. Like that she was to like black magic, and she did a lot of things to people that she shouldn't have done. You know, my mom being one of them. So, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking like, dude, she fucking did something really bad, and she wants me to go, you know, take care of it for her. Like, no. After that, I had one more encounter happen, but when that happened, I would start dreaming of her, but I never would see her face, you know? Like, my dreams were always, I know it was her, because that same scary feeling that I got when I felt that thing come into that room that night, I would wake up literally screaming, terrified from these nightmares I would have of her. Yeah, they're not even dreams, they were nightmares. Where she would just be sitting in this black room. Not black, she would be all black. This dark room. And she would kind of cackle, like laughing at me. And when I would wake up, I would be so fucking terrified. You know, I'm like, I know, I'm sorry, I know it was my grandma, but whatever she did, I know it must have been something really bad. But I like ask God for her to never come to me. Like, I prayed so much, I pray for her soul. But it's just when I have those dreams of her, and I haven't, like, honestly, I would have them so, like, one after another. But now it's been like, it's been like a year that I haven't dreamed of her. And like, honestly, before I go to sleep, I always like try to pray and like pray that nothing ever comes, you know? Or nothing ever, I think it's a cricket, or nothing ever like, or she just doesn't ever come back or try to haunt us, to be honest. Because I have a feeling that whatever she needed to tell me was something really bad. And I know that girl told me that I would be able to withstand what she was going to tell me. But something tells me it was just terrifying. Like I said, I would love to find that girl, you know, that used to work in HR. And just like I have so many questions for her. But yeah, that was one of my experiences with the ghost. I mean, I've had plenty of experiences, but this one is one that literally traumatized me. And within the years, as my daughter got older, like, I learned that she too would see things, you know, or she would feel things. Like when I dream of her, when I dream of my grandma, or when I dream of her, my daughter dreams of her. And my daughter's so terrified, and, you know, my daughter will wake up and she'll be like, Mom, like, she's so scary, like the way she comes in my dream. But I think I get afraid sometimes, thinking like, if she didn't get through to me, will she try to get through to my daughter?
someone was walking in right behind her. That office lady just knew things she couldn't have known. That's quite a bit to hear. Then her daughter sitting up in the bed and saying that word "kakoi" is a scary thing to hear a toddler say at the middle of the night. It's almost like the little girl was looking right at something her mom couldn't see. The detail about the grandma's skin being so fragile makes it feel way more real. I'd be panicking if my kids started talking to a late relative like that. Those dreams where she's just crackling in a dark room are enough for me. And that's it for today. If you liked this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe comment down below which story was your favorite. You can click on this video, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.